you're going to learn about the exciting features of this great product. I really enjoyed working with Access 1.1, but Access 2 has added some great and exciting features. On this tape, you're going to get an introduction to Microsoft Access. You're going to learn how to create your own database, how to enter, edit, and validate data, how to get help when you need it, how to sort and find, and also how to query. You're going to create your own forms and reports, and you're going to also learn how to import data from other sources. In this first section, you're going to get an introduction to Access. First, you're going to learn how to start Access. You're going to learn the parts of the Access desktop so that you can be more comfortable in working with the product. You're going to learn how to view a table and a table structure, and also how to print out the contents of the table. After this section, you'll be a lot more comfortable in working with Access. On my machine, the Microsoft Access icon is within the Microsoft Access program group. I'm going to come over here to Microsoft Access and double-click on the icon. This is loading up Access for me. When Access first loads, I get this introductory screen with Microsoft Access cue cards. From here, I can actually get a quick introduction, explore a sample database, and so forth. What I'm going to do is to close this window down right now, I'm going to double-click on this control icon right here. At this point, I get two menu options, File and Help, and I also get a couple of toolbar icons. Notice if I place my mouse cursor over the toolbar right here, it says New Database, and if I come over to here, it says Open Database. I'm going to go ahead and open a database. I could also do that through the File menu and Open Database. I'm going to go ahead and do it through the toolbar right here. I click on Open Database, and up comes a listing of any databases that would be in my C:\access directory. I don't have any in this directory. I'm going to go into SAMP Apps. This is a directory that you should also have underneath your Access directory since it's installed along with Access. I'm going to double-click on Sample Apps, and now I get a listing of the sample files that come with Microsoft Access 2.0. I'm going to come over here to Northwind and double-click my mouse. That's going to select the default option. Notice the blackened option over here, which says OK. I'm going to come over to Northwind and double-click. Now I've opened up the database. Let's take a look at our Access desktop. On the top, we have the Microsoft Access title bar. Down below it, we have the Microsoft Access menu bar, and below that, we have the toolbar. We also have the database that we opened. Notice our database has a title, and the title is Northwind. At this point, I also have some tabs on the left side over here: Table, Query, Form, Report, Macro, and Module. We'll learn more about these a little bit later. Let's learn about the toolbars and tooltips. Using the toolbar, you can access the most commonly used features of the product. All of the features found on the toolbar can also be found in Microsoft Access's menus, but you're going to see that you can do things a lot more quickly and comfortably using the toolbar. The tooltips tell you what each tool does. If I bring my mouse up to the toolbar and place my mouse for a few seconds over any of the tools, I can see what that tool does. In this case, I have New Database selected. Now I have Open Database, Attach Table, Print, and so forth. We're going to use a lot of these tools today in this tape. Let's take a look at the database window here. Earlier, I referenced these tabs that you see on the side of the database window. A database is actually a collection of tables, queries, forms, reports, macros, and modules. If I take my mouse pointer and click on Query, I can see all of the queries that are part of this database. If I click here, I see all of the forms. Here are the reports, the macros, and the modules. We're going to start by working with tables, and later on we're going to work with queries, forms, and reports. In other tapes, you'll learn about macros and modules. I want to view the contents of the customer's table. First, I need to make sure that the Table tab is selected, so I've clicked on it. I get a listing of all of the tables in this database. One of the tables is the customer's table. In order to open up that table, I can either double-click on its name or else single-click and then click on this Open button right here. Now I've opened up the table and I'm looking at its contents. Notice it says Table Customers, and I've got a bunch of information here. What I'm looking at is fields and records. Going across the top here, I can see the names of my fields. Customer ID, company name, contact title, and I've got some other that are hiding over here to the right. In order to get a better look at this table right here, I'm going to come up to the Maximize button for the table window, just this up arrow right here, and click on it. Now I'm looking at the customer table, but it's taking up all of my screen. Again, I have my fields. If I want to view the fields further over to the right on this table, I can come right down to here, to this right scroll arrow, and click on it. Notice I'm seeing the other fields in my table. I can also come over to this left scroll arrow and click on it and come back over to the left. I can take this scroll box and click and drag it to any point and let go, and I've moved over as well. So there's several different ways, even using my mouse, to move over to the right or to move back over to the left. So these are my field names. They're categories of information. Going down, I have records. Each record is an individual entity, a piece of information. So right here, I have all of the information about one customer with the customer ID of ALFKI. Notice I have the company name, contact title, and so forth. If I want to scroll down and see all the other records using my mouse, I can use this down scroll arrow right here and click on it. I'm scrolling down through my table. I can come up to the up arrow and scroll back up. And I can also take the scroll box and click and drag it down and let go, and I'm viewing a different part of my table. So remember, using your mouse, you can use the horizontal or vertical scroll bar to move about your database table. Let's see some other ways that we can move around our table. Take a look at these buttons right down here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this right arrow. I'm moving down a record at a time in my table. If I click on this button right here, I'm moving up a record at a time in my table. I can also move to the very last record in my table or to the very first record in my table. So those are some ways that I can move around using my mouse. Let's try some keyboard methods. I'm going to tap my Tab key several times, and I'm moving over a field at a time to the right. Shift Tab, and I'm moving a field at a time to the left. Down arrow, and I'm moving down a record at a time. Up arrow, and I'm moving up a record at a time. Page down, and I move down a screen at a time. Page up, and I move up a screen at a time. Let's go ahead and come down to this record right here and over to the right a little bit. I'm doing that with my right arrow this time instead of my Tab key. Now I'm going to tap my Home key. Home brings me to the very first field in the current record. I'm going to tap my End key, and End is taking me to the very last field in the current record. Home, and I'm back at the first field in the current record. Now I'm going to hold down my Control key and tap my Home key. That's going to take me to the first field of the first record. I'm going to hold down my Control key and tap my End key, END key, and I'm now going to the last field of the last record. So Control Home, Control End. And now I'm going to do Control Home again. I'm back at the first record. Underlying every table is a table structure. This is something that you set up before you add any data to the table. It defines the field names, the field types, and the field lengths of the table. There's also a lot of other things that we can define in the table structure. Let's take a look at the structure of this table. The easiest way to do this is with this tool right here. Notice that it's called Design View. I'm going to click on the Design View tool, and I go into Design View for this particular table. Here's the structure for the table we were just looking at. I've got several fields: customer ID, company name, contact title, address, city, region, postal code, country, phone, and fax. All of the fields in this particular table are text, meaning they contain text data. I also have some descriptions over here. These are optional, but are helpful when you're entering data into the table. Down below, I have attributes of this particular field that I have selected, fax. These are actually properties. That's the official name for them, field properties for the field that I have selected. Notice I have field size, format, input mask, caption, default value, and so forth. We're going to learn a lot about these later in the tape. If I want to go back and look at my actual data, I can click on this tool right here, which is Data Sheet View. I'm going to click on that now, and I'm back looking at my data. So I can go to Design View and back to Data Sheet View at any time that I want. If I don't want this data sheet to take up the entire screen, I can come up to this Restore button right here. Notice I'm not on the Restore button for the application, but instead just for this particular window. I'm going to click on it, and now my table's not taking up the entire screen for access. I can move this window around by grabbing its title bar. I can size it with a sizing handle. And no matter where I am, I can go back into Design View at any time. Back and forth from Design View to Data Sheet View. You're going to see that understanding the definition of a table is vital when you're working with Microsoft Access, so we'll be learning more about it later. For right now, let's see how to print out the data in this table. To take a look at what this data would print like if I were to send it to the printer, I can use my Print Preview icon on my toolbar right here. I click on it, and I get a zoomed out view of what the printout would look like. Notice I have a little magnifying glass. If I take that magnifying glass and place it where I want to zoom in and click, I've now zoomed in to that part of my table printout. Take a look at the printout and notice that I have my field names going across the top, and I can scroll across using my scroll bars. And I have all of my data records going down. There's many ways to print in Microsoft Access, and this is just the most basic. We're going to learn other ways to print later. If I want to come up and just send this out to the printer, I can come to this tool right here and click on it. I can print all, a particular selection, or pages that I'd like to print right now. In this case, I'm going to leave it at all and click on OK. I'm going to close down my preview by double-clicking on the control icon, and now I'm back at my database window. After viewing this section, you should have a better idea of what Access is all about. If you're not quite sure yet, don't worry. You'll be getting a lot more practice in working with Access throughout the tape. In this section, you learned how to start Access. You learned about the Access desktop and the database window. You learned how to view the contents of a table and how to print it out. You also took a look at the behind-the-scenes structure of the table. In the last section, you learned how to work with a database that had already been created for you. In this section, you're going to create your own database. You're going to learn about the elements of a database and what a relational database management system is. You're going to create your own database and your own tables. You're going to learn how to work with the properties of fields and tables and how to add tables to your database. Let's get started. We've been viewing this database called Northwind. I'm going to go ahead and close it down by double-clicking on this control icon right here. I don't need to worry about saving. Everything's automatically saved for me. Now I'm going to start a brand new database. Notice this icon right here says New Database. I could also select it by coming up to the File menu and selecting New Database. I'm going to go ahead and use the tool right here, click on it, and now I've got this dialog box for New Database. I want to make sure that my new database is going to go into my sample apps directory along with my Northwind database and the other ones that Microsoft provided. I'm going to call my new database MyDB. It's just a temporary one we're going to create so that you can learn how to create your own database. I click on OK, and this is automatically going to get the extension of MDB, which stands for Microsoft Database. So my file is actually called mydb.mdb. Now I have a database window. Unlike the one that we looked at, the Northwind database, if I click on each tab, none of them have contents. Microsoft Access databases are actually a collection of different components. Tables are a way that we can define the structure for entering our data and also a way to enter our data. Queries allow us to view particular parts of our data. Reports and forms are ways to view our data and to print it out. And forms are different than reports in that we can enter our data through forms rather than through the normal table mode. We also have modules and macros. Modules and macros are ways to automate our system. We're going to learn how to create a new table with and without Microsoft Access's new table wizards. I'm going to come over here, make sure that Table is selected, and then select New. Notice that I get the option of creating a table using the Table Wizard or just New Table. Let's start by trying to create a table with the Table Wizard. The Table Wizard gives me a lot of help in creating my table. Notice that I can look at business types of tables and personal tables. Once again, this is just a way to facilitate the creation of my table. I've got personal selected, and as I click on each of these different items, friends, guests, category, household inventory, recipes, and so forth, I get a different listing of sample fields over here. Notice for recipes, I get things such as a recipe ID, which meal, vegetarian, calories per serving, and so forth. Where if I come up to guests, I get a guest ID, first name, last name, and so forth. I'm planning a party, so I'm going to go ahead and have a guests table. I now need to tell Microsoft Access which fields I want to include in my table. Notice that these are just sample fields over here, and there's no fields currently selected for my table. If I want to take guest ID and include it in my new table over here, I can use this button right here to move that field over so that now it's going to be included in the table that I'm creating. If I want first name, I can click on it and then click on this right over here, or like I'm going to do with last name, I can double click. I double clicked on last name and notice that it's included over here. If I want to select spouse name, I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to double click on city. I'm using the scroll arrow. Double click on state, postal code, and I also want to know the home phone. So those are the fields that I've selected for inclusion in my new table. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on next. Wizards walk you through step by step in creating something, in this case a table. I'm being asked, what do I want to name my table? And I'm being prompted with guests. And I'm going to call this guest list for anniversary party. Also, I can let Microsoft Access set a primary key for me, or I can set a primary key myself. We're going to learn about primary keys later in the tape. For now, I'm going to select Set the Primary Key Myself and select Next. I'm being asked what data will be unique for each record. I have to have, or it's ideal to have, a key field in each table that's going to be unique. In other words, no guest is going to have the same guest ID. I'm going to go ahead and leave this at guest ID, and also it says what type of data do you want the primary key field to contain. Consecutive members, Microsoft Access assigns automatically to new records, numbers I enter when I add the new records, or numbers and or letters I enter when I add the new records. If I leave the selection right here, what this means is that every time I add a guest to my table, they will automatically receive the next available number. So my guests will get guest IDs of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. I'm going to go ahead, leave guest ID up here, and allow Microsoft Access to assign the numbers for me, and select Next. I'm also asked for the moment when Access is done creating my table, do I want to modify the table design, enter data right into the table, or enter data into the table using a form the wizard creates for me. I'm going to leave the default selection, enter data directly into the table, and go ahead and click on Finish. Access is creating my table for me, setting up the fields and so forth. And notice that now I have a table called Guest List for Anniversary Party. It has a counter field. That's because I've indicated that I want Access to assign the guest ID for me, and I can enter the first name, last name, spouse name, city, state, zip, and so forth. If I want to see the design of this table, remember that I can come up to this button right here, the Design View button, click on it, and now I'm looking at the design of my table. I have guest ID, and its data type is counter. I have first name, its data type is text, last name, spouse name, city, state, postal code, and home phone. These are all of the fields that I picked for inclusion in my table. Also notice that I have some special captions down here, and I've got some other properties, such as in this case, indexed, and it says yes and no duplicates. Once again, we'll learn all about properties in a few minutes. I'm going to go back over here to my table view and hit my Tab key to come over to first name. I'm going to invite somebody or put somebody on my guest list, and the person that I'm going to enter is going to be Mary. The last name is going to be Jones. I'm hitting Tab to get from field to field. Mary's spouse name is John. The city is going to be in Tarzana, California, 91356, and the home phone is going to be 818. Notice that I have up here a special picture for my data entry, 3454077. So I've entered a record. If I wanted to enter a second record, I can hit Tab right from my last field over here, and I'm now ready to enter my next record. Notice that I've got a guest ID of number 1 for my first record. A moment ago, I talked about having a unique key field. In other words, each of our guests will get assigned a unique guest ID. This brings us to an important concept in database management. It's called relational databases. When you're creating a database, you probably are going to have several different tables included in your database. And you're going to want to relate those tables on key fields. For example, let's think of our classic business situation. We've got customers. Those customers have invoices. Those invoices have detail line items on them. We're going to have a customer table, and we're going to have a field in that customer table probably called customer ID. A customer ID is going to be unique. No two records in the table will have the same customer ID. Then we're going to have our invoice table. On the invoice table, one of the fields is going to be customer ID. That field is going to identify which customer our data is being entered for. We're also going to have an invoice detail table. On the invoice detail table, you're going to have an invoice number field, and that's going to indicate which invoice number that detail line is going to be related to in the invoice table. So what we're doing is by having unique fields in each table, we can relate the tables, and we don't need to include all of our information in one large table. This is called relational database management. We'll learn more about relational databases and how they work later. For now, let's go ahead and close down this table we created, our guest list, and you're going to create one without a table wizard so you can see how that works. I've got my table guest list listed right here because I'm on the Table tab, and I'm going to select New to start a new table. This time, I'm not going to use a table wizard. Instead, I'm going to click on New Table. Notice that this is a little bit different than working with the table wizard. It's now my responsibility to put in all of my field names, data types, descriptions, and so forth. Let's enter a field name called last name. Field names can contain spaces, and the names can be up to 64 characters in length. I've now entered the name for this field, and now I'm going to hit my Tab key to come over to data type. Let's take a look at all of the data types that we have available to us. In order to do that, I'm going to click on this down arrow with a line underneath it. The types of fields that are available to me are text, memo, number, date, time, currency, counter, yes, no, and OLE object. I use text fields when my entry is going to contain mostly text. Memo fields are different than text fields in that I can put pages of information. Number fields contain numbers, so things like prices, costs, and so forth. Date and time fields contain anything that's a date or a time. Currency fields are similar to number fields, but they automatically relate to money. So I might make a number field something like age, where I might take a price and make it currency. I also have counter fields. You learned a little bit about them with the last table. Counter fields automatically increment for me. Yes, no fields are used whenever my entry is going to contain a true or a false, a yes or a no. For example, whether or not someone has paid. An OLE object is the most interesting type of field. An OLE object field can contain pictures, spreadsheets, sound, video, anything that you'd like that field to contain. This is a great type of field. I'm going to go ahead and leave last name as text and come over here and click in description. Remember that the description is optional, but it helps to describe the field, and it's also displayed on the status bar when I'm using this field on a form. I'm going to go ahead and type in friend's last name. I'm going to come down here and click in field name for my second entry and type in first name. This is also going to be text, and the description is friend's first name. I can hit tab again to come down to the field name for my third field. For this field, I'm going to go ahead and put in address, text, and friend's address, city, tab, and put in name of city, state, it's also text, name of state, and zip. Actually, I'm going to put zip code, and it's going to be text, and it's going to be the friend zip code. Notice that I didn't make zip code a numeric field. It's not actually something that I use in calculations, and in fact a zip code can contain leading zeros and other characters such as dashes. So I'm going to make my zip code a text field. Now that I've defined the basic structure of my table for the moment, I'm not going to fill in any of those properties yet, and I'm just going to go ahead and double-click to close down this table. When I double-click, I'm asked if I want to save the changes, and yes, I do. I'm now prompted for the name of my table, and this is going to be listing of my friends. Once I click on OK, I'm told there's no primary key defined. Do I want to create one? Actually, do I want to have Access create one? I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. I have two tables, guest list for anniversary party and listing of my friends. If I want to open up and view my table called listing of my friends, all I need to do is come over here, double click on it, and now I'm ready to enter some data. For example, I can enter in Terry for the last name, Sue for the first name, 45 Sunstone in Westlake Village, California, 93063. Hit tab again, and now I'm ready to enter my next record. So I've created a table with and without a wizard. Remember, if I want to go back to design view of this particular table, all I need to do is come up here, click on this icon, and I'm back in design view. Once you've created the definition for your table, you're going to want to refine that definition further. For example, you're going to want to specify things such as the width of each field, the format for the field, and so forth. We're going to learn how to do those things now. So far, we haven't been paying much attention to the field properties at the bottom of our screen. When I move from field to field by clicking in each field, the properties for that particular field are displayed. So for example, right now, I'm looking at the properties for my address field. I'm going to come down and click on State. I know that my state is never going to be more than 2 characters. If I want to change the properties for my state, I look down here under Field Properties, click and drag over 50, and change it to the number 2. And I've now indicated that state is only going to be 2 characters. Now if I come up to my city and click on my city, I can indicate that I never want my city to be more than 25 characters. So if I'm moving from field to field, I can see and change the properties for that particular field. Let's double click to close down this table, and I'm prompted and asked whether I want to save the changes to my table. This is because I changed some definitions for my table. I changed some field sizes. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm also told that the field size property of one or more of my fields has been changed to a shorter size. I'm warned that I might truncate or lose some of my data. I'm going to say that I want to continue anyways. I click on OK. I'm going to go ahead and close down the database called MyDB. And this time, to open up another database, rather than coming over here to the toolbar, I'm going to come up to the File menu. I come up to the File menu and take a look right here. I have a listing of the last 4 files that I've opened. There's my DB and there's my Northwind database. I actually want to open up my Northwind database, so I'm going to select it by clicking on it. Now I'm back in my Northwind database, and we're going to learn a little further how to work with properties. You just got a brief introduction on how to work with field properties. You're going to add a table to this existing database, and then you're going to learn a lot more about working with field and table properties. In order to add a new table to this database, I have the Table tab selected, and I click on New. Now I'm going to click on New Table because I don't want to use the table wizard right now. I'm ready to enter my field names, data types, and descriptions. For my first field name, it's going to be PAID. I'm creating a personnel action table that's going to relate to an employee table I already have set up. I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab, and this particular field is going to be a number field. All I need to do to select number, if I know I want a number field, is type an N for number, and notice that I already have number selected the moment that I type in N. Now I can hit my Tab key and type in a description if I want one. I'm not going to put in any descriptions for right now. I'm going to tab down to my second field, and that's going to be PA type. For my data type on that one, it's going to be text, and I can tab down ready for the next field. PA initiated by. This is who initiated the personnel action, and that one's also going to be a number field. So I type in N and tab on down to the next one. It's going to be a particular ID that's going to be numeric. Next I'm going to have PA scheduled date. That's going to be a date field, so I type a D for date and I can tab on my way. PA approved by, tab over to the data type, and that one is going to be a number. Now remember, if I don't remember my particular names, if I can't quite recall the different data types, all I need to do is use this pull down right here, and I can pick from my list and pick number. I'm going to go ahead and tab on my way. PA effective date, that's also going to be a date field. PA rating, and that's going to be a number. PA amount, that I know is always going to contain money, so I'm going to go ahead and select C for currency and tab on my way. PA comments, my comments might need to be quite long, so I don't want to limit to a text field. Instead I'm going to pick memo, so I type an M for memo, and now I've indicated that I want a memo field. Now that I've defined my field names and my data types, I'm going to further refine everything using my field properties down here. I'm going to start on my PAID. So I'm going to click up here on PAID and look down at its field properties. If I click in my field size, and remember this is a numeric field, I get a whole pull down here. Byte, integer, long integer, double, and single. You might wonder what these types are. It's quite easy to forget what each of them is. If I want to take a look at what each of these means, all I need to do is access help right from here. Notice I've already clicked in field size, so Access knows that I want help on my field size. Now I'm going to hit F1, which is help. I'm launching Access help, and right down here I get a listing of the different types of field sizes that are available for my numeric field. Notice that byte allows me to put in numbers from 0 to 255, no fractions, and so forth. Notice also the difference between each of these, besides the information they hold, is the amount of space that each one takes up. This one occupies 1 byte, integer 2 bytes, long integer 4 bytes, and so forth. I could make everything double, but I'm allocating a lot of extra disk space for no reason. Now that I've gotten some help on what each of these does, I'm going to close down help. And now I'm ready to pick what I really want. I want long integer. That allows me to only enter integers within a particularly wide range. For my format, this is how my data is going to be displayed. I'm going to pick what's called general number. Take a look and notice right here, I actually get a visual display of what each of these properties does. General number versus currency versus fixed, and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and pick general number so that I can have different amounts of decimal points. And that's all that I'm going to set for my PAID. Now I'm going to come down to PA type. Because this is a text field rather than a number field, notice that my field size is different. I don't get to pick from short integer, long integer, and so forth. Instead, I can indicate a numeric size. I know that my type should never exceed 1 character, so I'm going to type in a 1. Let's come down to initiated by. For initiated by, I don't have a very wide range of numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and pick integer. Also, for my format, I'm going to pick general number. For my scheduled date, I'm going to come over here to scheduled date, and for my format, take a look at all the options that I get. Once again, I get help on what each of these looks like. I'm going to pick short date, this one right here. For approved by, that's going to be a code, but I know it's not going to vary very much, so I'm going to go ahead and pick integer. And once again, I want general number. For my effective date, I'm going to pick short date. For my rating, that's going to be another integer. And general. For my amount, notice it's a currency field, so the format is automatically currency. What I'm also going to do, though, is take a look at my different options and notice that I could, even with a currency field, pick something that looks a little bit different. I'm not going to make any changes here. And for my comments, I'm not going to add any properties whatsoever. You just learned how to set some of your properties for your fields. Sometimes when you're entering data, you want something called a default value to pop up for you. What this means is, as you're entering data, a particular value, for example, a state name of California, will automatically pop up for you. You use default values when a lot of your data entry items contain a particular value. The default value for a field is one of the properties for the field. That's what we're going to learn how to change now. First, I'm going to set a default value for the PA type. To do that, I come up here to the field name, PA type, and click. Now I'm looking at the properties for that particular field. Notice I have a field size of 1, which I set earlier. I want to indicate a default value, so I'm going to click down here in default value. Most of my PA types are a Q, so I'm going to go ahead and select or type a Q. This is going to be an automatic value that comes up whenever I enter a new record. I'm also going to put in a default value for my PA scheduled date. So I click over here on PA scheduled date and come down to default value. I'm going to put in a special access function for my default value for this field. The function is going to be the date function. I type in date, open paren, close paren, and this indicates that the current date is automatically going to be placed in the record that I'm adding. For PA effective date, I'm also going to have a default value. I come over to the field name and click, and then come down to default value. Click in default value. The default value for my PA effective date is going to be today's date plus 28 days. To do this, I type in date, open paren, close paren. This gives me the current date, and then I put in plus 28. In other words, plus 28 days. So now I've entered some default values for my data. I can also enter some validation rules. Now that you've learned how to work with the back end of your table, in other words, you've learned how to enter field properties, let's enter some data and see how the field properties affect us. Instead of double-clicking to close down this table, I'm going to click on this icon on my toolbar, Datasheet View, to move right to Datasheet View. I'm told that I must save the table first. Do I want to save it now? And yes, I do. I'm also asked to give my table a name, since I haven't named my table yet. I'm going to call this my Personnel Action Table, my PA table. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And I'm warned there's no primary key defined. Do I want to have access create one? And I'm going to say no for now. At this point, I'm looking at my table. Notice that I'm in my datasheet view, and I'm ready to enter some data. For my PA ID, I'm going to type in the number 1 and hit Tab. Notice that my PA type is automatically set to Q for me. I hit Tab again, and I'm going to go ahead and type in the number 1. Hit Tab again, and notice that my scheduled date is also automatically set for me. I hit Tab again, and I'm at PA Approved By. I'm going to enter a 2 here and Tab one more time. Notice that my PA effective date is 28 days after my PA scheduled date. I hit Tab again, and I can enter my PA rating. I'm going to type in the number 2 and hit Tab. For the amount, notice that it automatically has dollar signs and 2 decimal points. This is because this is a currency field. I type in the number 1000. I don't need to type in a dollar sign or any decimal points, and I hit Tab, and it displays as 1000.00, including a dollar sign and a comma. And I'm going to type in, this is a great raise. When I hit Tab, I'd be ready to enter my new record. And notice once again, I have the Q, the 516, and so forth. If I want to go back into Design View, I simply click on the Design View icon right here. And now I'm looking at Design View of my table again. Each time when Access has asked you whether or not you wanted access to create a primary field, we said no. In this next section, you're going to learn about relationships, primary keys, and indexes. I'm going to go ahead and close down this table by double-clicking on the control icon right here. I'm now looking at my database window. This database already has several relationships defined. If I want to see the relationships that are already defined, I can come right up here to this icon, which is called the Relationships icon, and click my mouse. I now get a graphical picture of all of the relationships that have been set up. Notice that I have a customers table, an orders table, and an orders details table. This is exactly like the example that I explained to you in an earlier section of the tape. In my customer table, I have a customer ID. Over here, I have my orders table. Notice that my orders table also has a customer ID, and there's a line indicating that these two tables have already been related on customer ID. In my orders table, I have an order ID. Over here, I have my order details table. A relationship has been set up from the order ID in the orders table to the order ID in the orders detail table. I also have several other relationships that have been set up for me. Let's take a better look at these relationships. Customer ID to my orders table. Every customer should have a unique customer ID, but if I look over here at my orders table, I hope that I have multiple orders for a customer. This is called a one-to-many relationship. For every one customer in my customer table, I hopefully have multiple orders in my order table. So the customer ID, we hope, is going to appear several times in this orders table. If I look from my orders table to my order detail table, my order ID should be unique within my order table. So every order should have a unique order ID. But over here in my order details table, I hope that my customer has ordered multiple items. So I hope that there's multiple order IDs over here on my order detail table. Once again, a one-to-many relationship. But if I look from my order details table to my products table, in my products table, this is a listing of my inventory of all the products I have. I should, in this table, have unique product IDs for every product. So looking from my product ID over to my product table, I should have a one-to-one relationship. When I look at this product ID, I should only find one product ID in my product table that matches. What we're going to do is set up a relation between the employee table, which was already set up for you. This is the table of all of the employees in the company, and our personnel action table, which you just created. What we're going to do is relate them on the employee ID from the employee table to the PA ID in the personnel action table. To do this, I'm going to come over here and click on Add Table to add a table. At this point, I have my personnel action table. Notice I can view my tables, my queries, or both. We're going to just leave it at tables and select the personnel action table. I click on it and click on add. At this point, I'm going to select close because I don't want to add any more tables. If I want to set a relationship between the employee ID and the PA table, and I know the relationship is based on the PA ID in this table, all I need to do is click on the employee ID and drag my mouse down on top of the PA ID in the PA table and let go. I get this dialog box right here. I have employee ID from the employee table and PA ID from the PA table. I'm going to go ahead and click on join type right here. This indicates what kind of a join I want. What I want to do is pick number 3. I want to include all records from my PA table and only those records in employees where the joined fields are equal. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. I also want to do something called Enforce Referential Integrity. I do that by clicking right here on Enforce Referential Integrity. What this means is that I cannot add a record to my PA table unless the employee ID exists in the employee table. And it also means that I cannot delete, if I don't want to, I cannot delete entries from the employee table if there's corresponding entries in the PA table. Now my relationship is a one-to-many. Employee ID is unique, but within the PA table I might have multiple personnel actions, so I leave this button right here selected, and notice I can cascade update related fields or cascade delete related fields. What this means, if I were to select cascade delete related fields and I were to delete an employee ID, it would automatically delete all of the corresponding entries in the PA table. If I were to cascade update, what that means is that if I were to change an employee ID in the employee table, it would automatically change the corresponding employee ID in the PA table. I don't want to cascade delete, but I do want to cascade update. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this box right here. At this point, I'm ready to click on create, and I'm creating my relationship. Notice I have a relationship going on here from my employee table to my PA table. Now the direction in which I dragged, in this case from my employee ID to the PA ID, is very important. I created a relationship from the employees table to the PA table. This is the one, this is the many. That's why I clicked and dragged the employee ID down to the PA ID rather than the other way around. So you need to understand which is the one and which is the many into your one-to-many relationship. At this point, I'm ready to close down this window. I come up to the control icon and double-click my mouse. I'm asked if I want to save my changes, the relationship that I've set up. I do, so I click on yes. I've now saved my relationship, and I've learned how to set up a relationship. Before we complete this section, you're going to learn how to create an index. An index allows you to determine the order of your data. It allows you to specify that the value in the field must be unique or not, and it also can speed up your data access. We're going to talk more about data access in a little bit. We're going to add an index and a primary key to our PA table, and you're going to learn the differences between the two. I'm going to select my PA table by single-clicking on it, and I want to go directly into design mode. To do that from here, the easiest way is to click on this design button right here. I'm now in design mode for my personnel action table. I want to make my PA ID my key. In order to do that, all I need to do is, with that field selected, I come up here and click on Set Primary Key. By setting this as a primary key, I'm ensuring that I cannot have any duplicate values on my personnel action ID and that my table is automatically going to be in order by my personnel action number. This is very similar to an index. What we're going to do now is create our index. An index is something that we can use in addition to our primary key. So remember that your primary key is the most important setting, and index is something that's secondary. I often look at my data in order by PA effective date. I'm going to go ahead and select PA effective date and look down into the properties right here and notice that indexed says no. I'm going to click on the indexed field, use my pull down, and notice that I have three options: no, yes with duplicates okay, and yes with no duplicates. I want to allow duplicates. So I'm going to say yes, duplicates okay. So what does my index do for me? Well, I often look at my data in the order of PA effective date, and I also often query it by PA effective date. By creating this as an index, I'm speeding up my searches whenever I want to look at something by my PA effective date. Although indexes speed up my searches, it actually slows down my data entry, because every time I enter a record, it automatically has to update this index. So it's a trade-off. You only want to set indexes for fields that you search on frequently. Once again, remember, my key is the most important thing. This key ensures that I cannot have any duplicates on PAID and that my records are automatically ordered by my PAID. I want to save my changes, and I'm going to go ahead and double-click and say yes, I want to save my changes to the table. And I'm back here looking at my database. You've just learned a lot of information about working with properties, key fields, and indexes. You might find this a little bit overwhelming, but it's important to spend the time now and learn how to set up your databases properly. If you don't spend the time now, you'll find that your database tables will be very disorganized and won't make a lot of sense. Although complicated, this information is very, very important. Remember, the properties of a field determine what can go into the field and what it looks like. Remember that a key field limits what goes into your table in the sense that a key field must be unique. It also determines the default order for the table. An index is a way to speed up your searches and also at times to eliminate duplicates. This will be reinforced further as you work with Access. In this section, you're going to become more comfortable in working with your data. You're going to add and edit some records. You're going to learn about data validation, and you're going to learn how to change the appearance of your data sheet. Let's add some records to our customers table. To do that, if I click on customers, I can click on open, or remember, I can double click on customers. I'm going to double click on customers, and here's my customer table. If I want to add a record, the best way to do that is by clicking on this button right here, which takes me to the end of the table, and then clicking on this button, which takes me down one record. I'm going to go ahead and enter a customer ID. I type in ABCDE and hit my tab key. I'm now ready to enter my company name. I'm going to type in the ABC Company. My contact name is Joe Smith. He's the president of the company. His address is 123 Main Street. And the city is going to be Simi Valley. The region is California, and the zip is 93063. My country is USA. The phone there is going to be 805-255-1212. And he doesn't have a fax number. I hit tab, and I can add another record. Let's enter one more. For this one, I'm going to put in LONDA. The name of the company is going to be London Airlines. The contact there is going to be Sally Hansen. The contact title is going to be owner. And the address there is going to be 879 Stone Street. The city is going to be London. The region is going to be NSW, and the postal code is going to be 07-123. The country is England. I don't know the phone or the fax right now, so I'm going to leave them blank. So I've added a couple of records. If I realize I need to make a change, for example, this isn't the ABC company, it's just going to be ABC company. If I get what's called an I bar, notice that my mouse right here looks like an I. You don't want this form right here, you want the I bar. If I click and drag over the word the and let go, and now hit my delete key, I might need to get that extra space right there. It now says ABC Company. So to edit a record, I simply move up to that record and make whatever change that I want. If I want to change Sally's position, contact title, to chief owner, I can come over here, click to get an insertion point, and type in chief owner. At this point, to really save this change, all I need to do is move to another record. To do that, I either click on another record or I can use my up arrow key or down arrow key. That's when the record actually gets written to the disk. Besides that, I don't need to do any saving. So I've added some records and edited some records. What if I want to select a record or records? To select one record, I get this mouse pointer form right here. It's a right-facing arrow over on the gray buttons on the left side of the table. I click and I've selected one record. If I want to deselect that record and select another one, I bring my mouse pointer on top of the record I want to select and click. So I'm selecting a record. You select records so that you can print them or do something to them, such as delete them. If I want to delete this one record right here, I can click on it and hit my delete key. I'm told I've just deleted one record, and I told click on OK to save my changes. I click on OK, and I've now deleted that record. Now let's go ahead and put in a few new customer IDs. I'm going to put in LLLLL, just because I want to get something in quickly. It's the L company. And I'm just going to click right over here, ready to put in another customer ID. I'm going to go ahead for this record and put in MMMMM. It's the M company. And finally, one more. Click down on the new record and put in JJJJJ, and it's the J company. So now I've put in some records that I really want to delete. To delete multiple records, I can select them at the same time. I click and drag to select them. I've selected the 3 that I want to delete. Hit my delete key. I'm warned that I'm deleting 3 records, and then I click on OK, and those records are gone. So I've deleted those 3 records. Now that we've deleted the records, let's go ahead and close down this table. At this point, we're going to learn about data validation. To do that, let's go into design mode for the PA table that we created earlier. I'm going to click on the PA table and click on Design. I'm looking at the structure of my PA table. In order to add some validation for this table, I'm going to add a validation rule and validation text. A validation rule is a rule for data entry. For example, for a particular code, you might want to limit entry to an A, C, R, or K. In that case, you could put in a rule that only those letters were allowed to be entered into the table. A validation text is a message that comes up when somebody has violated the validation rule while they're doing their data entry. We're going to start by entering a validation rule for our personnel action ID. To do that, I click right here under validation rule for my field properties, and I want to limit the entries in the sense that they must be greater than 0. So I'm going to type in a greater than sign and then a 0 to indicate that this must be greater than 0. For my validation text, I'm going to enter the personnel ID must be greater than 0. Next, I'm going to enter some validation for my PA type. I click on PA type and come down to the validation rule. Remember, this is different than the default or automatic value. This rule actually limits what goes into the field. I want to limit to the following characters: H, S, Q, Y, B, or C. Here's how I do it. I type in H or S or Q or Y or B or C. So I've put in the valid entries separated by the word or. That's all I needed to do. I come down here to the validation text and notice that Access has entered some quotation marks for me. You could have entered these, but it's a lot easier to let Access do it for you. The message that I want to give if somebody violates the rule is that only H, S, Q, Y, B, and C can be entered. Remember, this is the text that will appear if they violate the rule. I'm also going to, on PA initiated by, indicate that it must be greater than 0. I put in greater than 0 for the rule and put in must be greater than 0. Also, for my PA scheduled date, I want a validation rule. Remember, my default is the current date, but my rule is going to be that the scheduled date must be between today's date minus 3650. If you're wondering what that is, that gives me 10 years ago. And date plus 365. This might seem complicated. Let's take a better look at it. I'm going to hit my home key to go to the beginning of this. It says between today's date minus 3650, meaning between 10 years ago from today, and date plus 365. That means 1 year from right now. This syntax is important to Access. The key words are between and end. So for example, if I wanted to be very simple, I could say between 1 and 5, meaning that the number would need to be between 1 and 5. For my validation text, I'm going to put in a message saying that my scheduled date cannot be more than 10 years ago or more than 1 year from now. And there we go. The last validation I'm going to put in is going to be underneath my rating. I click in rating and come down to validation rule. For this rule, I'm going to put between 0 and 9 or is null. What this means is that my number needs to be between the number 0 and the number 9, or it can be blank. That's what the is null means. So you just need to learn a little bit about Access's language. Let's go back and enter some data into this table, and let's see how we get affected by these rules. To do that, I can come up and click on this button right here, which is my datasheet view, and I'm asked if I want to save my changes. I say OK, and notice my data integrity rules have been changed. It says existing data may not be valid for the new rules. Would I like my existing data to be tested with the new rule? If you have a lot of data, this can be lengthy. You're told what records violate the rules. I'm going to go ahead and just say yes. And my data was tested, and apparently all of my data met the rules. I'm going to come down to a brand new record right here. I'm going to enter in an ID, and I'm going to try to enter in an ID of -1 and hit my tab key. Notice I get my validation text. It says my PAID must be greater than 0. I click on OK, and if I change this to 2 and hit my tab key, I passed my data entry rule. Let's enter some more data. I've entered my ID, I'm going to go ahead and enter a type of A. When I hit my Tab key, I get the message saying only H, S, Q, Y, B, and C can be entered. I click on OK, and I'm going to change this to a C and hit my Tab key. For initiated by, I'm going to enter a 2. For scheduled date, I'm going to go ahead and enter 5/1 of 61 and hit my Tab key. It says the scheduled date cannot be more than 10 years ago or more than 1 year from now. I click on OK. I'm going to change it to 5/1 of 94, and no problem. PA approved by, I'll put in a 2. And effective date, I'm going to go ahead on that one and put in 5/1 of 61 and tab, and it accepted it because I don't have that validation rule on my effective date. For my rating, I'll put in 2, and for my amount, I'll put in 2,000 and nothing for my comments. So you can see that you get your validation text. It automatically comes up whenever you violate your validation rule. Let's try something a little bit different. Here I'm going to enter a PA ID of 1. Remember, this record up here already has a PA ID of 1. When I hit my Tab key, nothing happens. Let's go ahead and tab over to enter a PA initiated by and make it the number 2. I'm now going to go ahead and tap my down arrow to try to come off of the record. Tap my down arrow, and notice now I get a different type of message, not one that I typed in. It says duplicate value in the index primary key or relationship. Changes were unsuccessful. What Access is upset about is PAID is a key field. It's not allowing me to duplicate that entry. If I change this to a 3, now I can down arrow off of the record. In a little bit, you're going to learn how to work with fancy data entry forms. For now, though, we're going to learn how to enhance our datasheet view. Let's start by changing some of our widths of our fields. Now realize that this is not affecting the underlying structure of your table. This is the most confusing concept of what we're about to do. We're going to change some column widths and also some field orders. But if we go back into design mode right here, the design will not change. It's only the appearance of our data sheet that's going to change. If I take my mouse pointer between two fields, notice how I get a line with a double-headed arrow through it. If I click and drag over to the left, I'm narrowing this field. I can do the same thing for my PA type. PA initiated by, if I make it narrower, notice that I'm cutting off the title up here. I'm going to go ahead and make that one wider again. PA scheduled date isn't quite showing up, so I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit wider. Same thing with PA approved by. So now I have all of my field names showing. I can do other things such as change the order of my fields in my view. For example, I can click right here to select PA scheduled date. Once I've selected that field, I can click and drag it over. Notice the black line that's moving. That black line is now popped in between PAID and PA type. When I let go, that field has now moved over so that it's next to PAID. But if I come over here to the table structure, notice that I've got PAID still immediately followed by PA type. So once again, the field width in the underlying table has not changed, nor has the field order. I can do other things, such as change the font in my table. To do that, if I come up to the Format menu and pick Font, I can, for example, pick another font. I'm going to go ahead, scroll up in my list, and pick Arial, and I can make it a little bit bigger, 10, and then click on OK. Notice that I've made my font larger. Now if I like this and I want to save this for future views of the table, if I double-click to close down the table, I'm asked if I want to save my layout changes. These are the changes to the appearance in Datasheet view. I'm going to go ahead and click on Yes, and because I said yes, if I double-click and open back up my table, Access remembers my changes. If I make this field very small and go ahead and double click and say no, if I go back in, the field is back how it was originally. In this last section, you learned some tricks for entering and editing your data. You also learned how to change the appearance of your data sheet. These are some handy tips when you're working with Microsoft Access tables. Although you'll find as you work with Access, you'll become more and more comfortable, sometimes you need help. The Microsoft Access Help feature is very powerful and very friendly. Let's take a look at it. Access has this great feature called cue cards. Cue cards walk you through doing some of the commonly used tasks. I'm going to come up to the Help menu and come up and select cue cards. Over on the right side of my screen, I get a menu. Notice that I can get a quick overview, build a database with tables, work with data. Well, we just worked with data. Let's see what cue cards have to say about working with data. Come over to this button right here and click. Now I get a sub-menu telling me about the different options for entering and editing my data. See how data sheets and forms work, opening a table, viewing data in a data sheet. Well, I want to learn more about adding, editing, or deleting data. I come over here and click. Again, I get a sub-menu. Add new data, edit data, undo changes, delete data. Let's take a look at delete data. Notice I can delete data in a field or delete one or more records. Let's take a look at delete one or more records. It says select and delete records or design a delete query. Let's take a look at select and delete records. Here I have step-by-step instructions on how to select and delete records. It says select the records you want to delete by clicking the record selector and dragging the pointer over all the records you want. So I get instructions step-by-step on what to do. I can actually come over here with my cue cards up on the screen and do exactly what I'm told. I click and drag and notice that my directions are still right here. Now I go to Next. And again, it says to continue, click the Cut button on the toolbar. That's another way to delete records. We showed you how to delete them using your Delete key. Up here, it says to use the Cut button. It says OK to confirm your change. So that's another way to delete records. The important thing to understand here is that I can actually perform the functions on my data while looking at the cue cards. If I click on Next, I'm back here and I can do something else, such as learn about editing data. Under Edit Data, I can see how to make changes to individual records one at a time. Again, I have step-by-step information. I'm going to go ahead and close down my cue cards because we're going to take a look at a different kind of help. If I want to deselect these records, I can click anywhere and deselect them. Let's say that I want to know how to validate data. I can come up to the Help menu and select Search. At this point, I'm going to type in V for validate, and then an A, and then an L, and notice I've got a bunch of entries for validation. If I want to learn about validation rules in text, I could double-click right here, and I get a bunch of different topics on validating rules and text. If I want to see about making validation rules and bring them up as cue cards, I can actually double-click right here, and I get cue cards on validating my text. At this point, I can follow along. For example, it says from the Window menu, choose the name of the table to make it the active window. Click the Design View button on the toolbar. Well, I already have my table up over here. I can change to Design View. There I am in Design View. And now click on Next. And again, I can walk through. For example, make rules for data. Here I get a validation rule. I can even see examples of validation rules. Here's some examples. So this is quite helpful. If I want to see some more, I click on Next again. I'm going to go ahead and close down my cue cards and show you one more way to get help. We did this one earlier, but let's review it. If I click Invalidation Rule, remember we did this for field size, but I'm clicking Invalidation Rule and now hitting my F1 function key, indicating that I want some help on the validation rule. I'm actually getting validation rule, validation text properties right away. I can scroll down and look at it. In fact, if I want to print this information out, I can come up to the File menu and select Print Topic. Now I'm actually printing this out. Now I'm ready to exit out of help. I can come up here to the control icon and double click. A lot of times when I'm working with Access, I get frustrated that I forget that help is there to give me some assistance. Remember, whenever you're doing something, if you get frustrated, you can hit your F1 key or you can come up to the help menu. There's lots of ways to get help. Remember to use it. You'll be glad to hear that now we've covered all of the hard stuff. When I first learned Access, I found that I could create forms, create reports, and so forth. They were quite easy. What I had trouble with were the basics of creating the validation rules, creating my tables, and so forth. You've learned that now, so now we're ready to have some fun. In this section, you're going to learn how to sort your data and also how to filter your data. I'm going to come up here and double-click to close down my PA table. I'm going to pull up my customers table by double-clicking on it. Now I'm in my customer table. Notice I'm in order by my customer ID. That's because that's my key field. I may want to be in order by something else. For example, I may want to be in order by my city. To do that, all I need to do is come over here, click on my city, and come over to this button right here. This sorts me in ascending order, A to Z. I click on it, and now all of my records are in order by the city. Now to make this easier to see, I'm going to scroll back over, and I'm going to actually do something called lock these two fields, customer ID and company name, so we can keep them up on the screen as we sort. I take my mouse pointer and I get a down arrow, just like this, and click and drag to select the two fields, customer ID and company name. At this point, I'm going to come up to my Format menu and select Freeze Columns. If I click anywhere to deselect those two columns, notice that I have a line indicating that those two columns are frozen. What that means is I can now tab over and look at my city, and my customer ID and company name stay on the screen at all times. So now I'm in order by my city. What if I want to be in order by something such as my country? I click to select country, and now I can select Sort Ascending. And I'm now in order by my country. If I want to be in order by my country in combination with my city, but my country is my first level of sort, first I'm going to select country. Once the column is selected, now I click and drag to bring country to the left of city. So I've got country and city. At this point, to make sure that I'm in order by city within a country, notice I'm not right now, I can select, I'm going to click over here, come back and select country and city, and now pick Sort Ascending. I'm now in order by country, and within a country, I'm in order by city. So for example, in Brazil, take a look and notice that within Brazil, I'm in order by city. If I want to go into descending order, for example, I'm going to now pick company name and come over and pick descending. Notice what happens. My company name is in descending order. So I can sort in ascending or descending order and by one field or by a combination of multiple fields. I'm going to come back, pick customer ID, and select ascending. I can also find records that meet particular criteria. Notice I'm still locked. I'm going to come over here to my contact title, and at this point, I'm going to search for all of my presidents. To do that, I can come up to this button right here, which is my Find button. I'm going to go ahead and type in president. I'm searching downward from the current record. I was on the top record, so I'm searching down from the first record, and I'm searching only within the current field. I'm not matching my case, so it doesn't really matter what case I type this in. I'm going to go ahead and click on Find First. Now, Find First actually does start at the top of the table and find the very first one. It doesn't look like anything happened. If I take this dialog box by the title bar and click and drag it down, I can now see that I'm on the first president. If I click on Find Next, it says Microsoft Access has reached the end of the records. Do I want to continue searching from the beginning? I'm going to say no. What this indicates to me, I'm also going to say OK. What this indicates to me is that there's no more presidents in this table. Let's change this Find What to Owner. I type in owner, and first I'm going to find first. It took me to the first owner. Now I click on Find Next. This time I did find something, and I went to the next owner. I can click on Find Next, Find Next, Find Next. It doesn't look like it's on a record now. Remember, all I need to do is move this dialog box by the title bar, and I can find the next one. If at some point I don't want to find anymore, I click on Close. Now I'm going to go ahead and do Control Home to get up to my first record and click back in Contact Title. Let's try another find. This time, I want to find any records that have associate in them. I'm going to go ahead and type in associate, but if I say match whole field, I'm not going to find anyone unless their entire title is associate. So what I'm going to do is use this pull down right here and pick any part of field. I'm going to find first so that it starts at the top of the table, and there's my sales associate. Now if I say Find Next, I go to my next sales associate, but remember this could be any type of associate. Find Next, and so forth. Close, and I just remain on that particular record. What if I want to search and replace as opposed to just search? I'm going to go ahead, click on my first record again, and I'm going to change owner to company owner. To do that, I can't use this button because this button does not allow me to search and replace. It only allows me to find or to search. What I can do is come up to my Edit menu and pick Replace. What I'm going to search for is owner. Since associate is all blue, all I need to do is start typing, and I type in owner. What I want to replace it with is company owner. I'm replacing owner with company owner only in the current field, but I want to match the whole field. What that means is that I'm going to only replace the records where the entire field is owner. Otherwise, it would try to fill in company owner even where owner is part of some other title. I'm going to go ahead and select Replace All. I now get a message saying that Access has reached the end of the records. Do I want to continue searching from the beginning? I already was at the beginning, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. Also, I'm told I won't be able to undo this replace. It says to click OK to continue or cancel to undo. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. At this point, I'm going to click on Close, and all of my owners are now company owners. If I scroll down and look at the rest of my records, you can see that all my owners are company owners. To take a more conservative approach, when you first start to do searches and replaces, there's two things you can do. One is you just find the first record and replace one at a time rather than replace all. And the other is you can always back up your database. In case you make a mistake, you can always go back to the original. In fact, it's always a good idea to back up your database frequently. I'm going to come over to this button right here so I can go to my first record again. And now I'm going to scroll over and look at my data. Notice that I have a lot of different countries. I just want to filter my data so that I'm looking at people that are in the USA. To do that, I can come up to this button right here. It says Edit, Filter, Sort. I click on it, and I get a grid where I can indicate my criteria. My criteria for my customer ID is not what I want. I'm going to go ahead and click right here on this button and delete so that customer ID goes away. Instead, I'm going to scroll down over here and grab the country. One of my favorite ways to bring this down to the query grid is click and drag down. And there I've brought country down to the filter grid. Now I'm going to indicate my criteria. I click in criteria and type in USA. Now all I need to do is come up to this button right here which says Apply Filter Sort. I click on it and now I've applied my filter and I'm only looking at the records in the USA. If I want to look at USA and also look at France, I can come up here, Edit Filter Sort, come over to this OR right here and put in France. I'm going to go ahead and come up here, Apply Filter Sort, and let's scroll over and look at our country. I've got France and USA, but they're not in any particular order. Let's go back and edit our filter sort, and this time we're going to go ahead and click right here and pick that we want ascending order by country, and also I'm going to go ahead and grab my city, and this time rather than clicking and dragging it over, I'm going to double click and come over and pick ascending for my city as well. I'm not going to indicate any criteria for my city. At this point, I apply the filter or sort, and I'm looking at just France and USA in alphabetical order by country in combination with the city. What if I want to look at all of the records again? If I come up to this button right here, it says Show All Records. I click on it, and now I have all of my records back. Notice that I'm looking at all different cities and countries. So that's how I can apply a filter or a sort. Before I exit out of this table, if I want to get rid of my freeze right here, I can come up to the Format menu and pick Unfreeze All Columns. Now notice that if I scroll over to the right, I'm no longer viewing my customer ID and company name. I'm now going to double click to close down this table, and I'm asked if I want to save the layout changes I've made. The layout changes I made were freezing and unfreezing those columns. I don't want to save anything, so I say no. Let's go into our Orders Details table. To do that, I double click. Let's set up one more filter. I come over here to my Edit Filter Sort, and I only want to look at the items where the unit price is greater than 30. I click over here, and at this point, I'm going to double click to bring down unit price. For the criteria, I type in greater than 30. At this point, I can apply it. And now I'm looking at only those items where the unit price is greater than 30. So you can actually use numeric operators. Let's edit this one more time because I want to see the ones that are greater than 30 and are less than 50. Notice I have some that are actually greater than 50. Go in and Edit Filter Sort. Come over and click in the criteria and say and less than 50. Now realize I'm not getting any that are equal to 30 or equal to 50. Then I would need to say greater than equal to 30, less than equal to 50. I apply it, and now I'm no longer seeing any records where the price is greater than 50. We'll learn more about setting criteria in a few moments when you learn about querying. For now, I'm going to double click to close down this table, and I wasn't asked any questions because I didn't change any of the properties of the actual table. You just learned how to better manipulate your table data. You learned how to sort your data on one or multiple fields. You also learned how to find and replace data, and finally, how to apply filters so that you can look at specific records. In this section, you're going to learn how to create queries. Queries are similar to filters, except that queries are used with forms and reports to limit what you're looking at. Queries are very useful, and you'll find that you're using them all the time. When you want to create a new query, you can use a query wizard, or you can create the query from scratch. To do either, you click on the Query tab and then click on New. The query wizards are actually for some advanced queries, so we're just going to create our query from scratch. I click on New Query and I get a query grid. In front of it, I get the ability to add a table. I need to add a table. This is the table that I want to query on. I'm going to go ahead and query on the customer table. I click on Customers and then click on Add. I also could have double-clicked on Customers. At this point, unless I want to add more tables to my query, I click on Close. At this point, I get a listing of all of my fields in the customer table. This looks very similar to the grid we used on our filter, and it actually is. I'm going to go ahead and show you how similar it is. What we're going to do is we're going to pick Country. I'm going to double-click to select Country, and it moves down to my query grid. At this point, I'm going to say that my criteria is going to be USA or Canada or Mexico. Now notice that I could have put my ors going down, and then I don't need to type the word or I can put them across on the criteria using the word or in between. So I've said USA or Canada or Mexico. This is similar to our data validation when we said Q or R or P. In other words, the data validation items. I also want to see my city field. Remember, I can double-click on it, or I can click and drag it down to the grid. Another way that I can select a field is by clicking and using this pull down right over here. And I can pick any field that I want, for example, contact title. I can also select multiple fields at a time and bring them over to the query grid. For example, I can pick address, and then holding down my control key, I can scroll down and pick phone and fax. Notice that all three are selected. That's because I held down my control key while I selected them. Now I can click and drag all of them over to the query grid at one time. Now all three of them are there. So I have country, city, contact title, address, phone, and fax. I'm going to go ahead and take a look and see what I have right now. All I need to do is come up here and click on Datasheet View, and I've moved to Datasheet View, and I'm viewing the country, city, title, address, phone, and fax. If I want to size this a little bit bigger, remember I can do that with the sizing handle so that I'm viewing all of my data. Notice that I'm only looking at Mexico, USA, and Canada. I'm going to go back into Design View by clicking right here. I also want to add my contact name. I've scrolled up and I have contact name. To bring it to the grid and place it right after the city, all I need to do is take it, click and drag, and come over and drop it right on top of the title. I've moved the title over and inserted contact name. I've also decided that I don't want the address. What I'm going to do is click right here and hit my delete key. And now I've removed the address. So I have some fields selected, I have some criteria selected, and once again, I'm going to go ahead and go into Datasheet View. Now I'm looking at country and city and contact name, and I'm no longer looking at the address. Let's go back to Design View, come over to Sort, and indicate that I want the country in ascending order, as well as the city in ascending order. Again, let's go back to Datasheet View, and now I've actually ordered the records in country in combination with city. I can actually edit my data while I'm looking at the results of my query. By the way, The formal name for the results of a query is a dynaset. So we'll be talking about editing our dynaset. When I edit the data looking at my dynaset, it actually edits the data in my original table. Let's see how easy this is to do. I'm going to come down here to Anna and change Anna's name to include two N's. I'm going to click between the N and the A and type another N. So now I have A-N-N-A. I'm also going to come over here to Antonio and change this to Anthony. Now remember, in order to save my changes, I need to move off of the record. So I click on any other record, and now I've saved my changes. So I have Anthony Marino and Anna Trujillo. Let's go ahead and close down our query and save it on the way out. I'm going to go ahead, double click to close down my query and say yes, I want to save it. I'm going to call it North America because it includes my North America records, and then click on OK. Let's come back, click on the Table tab, and look at our customer table. Notice that I have Anna over here with two N's, and I also have Anthony. I'm actually looking at my table rather than my dynaset. I'm going to close down my table, come back over here to my Query tab, and if I scroll down, there's North America. If I want to run this query, I double click, and now I'm back in viewing the results of my query. Take a look. There we have Anthony and Anna, but now we're only looking at Canada, Mexico, and USA, and I'm looking at my dynaset, the results of my query called North America. There's an important concept to understand when you're working with queries. When you save a query, you are not saving the actual dynaset or result of the query. You're only saving the query's definition. You're saving the definition so that you can run the query later, or you can edit the definition at some later time. I'm looking at my dynaset, or the result of my query. If I want to go back and change something about the query, I can go back into Design View right here. I'm going to go ahead, click on Design View, and I want to change the titles of my query. So here I am in Design View. Let's take one more look at Datasheet View, and notice this says Contact Name and Contact Title. I'm going to change these so that they say Name and Title. Go back to Design View and come over here to Contact Name. I'm going to click just to the left of C in Contact and type in the word name and then a colon. Anything that precedes the colon is the title for the field, and anything that follows the colon is the actual field name. I'm going to do the same thing for contact. Just click to the left of the C and type in title and a colon. Let's do one more thing. For phone, I want it to say phone number. I click to the left of the P in phone, type in phone, a space, and a pound sign, and then a colon. So it's going to say phone number. Do the same thing for fax. Fax, number, and a colon. Let's go back into Datasheet View. And now I'm looking at my data, my dynaset, and it says name, title, phone number, and fax number. I'm going to double click to close down this query and say yes, I want to save the changes. Once again, here's a listing of all of the queries that exist in this particular database. If I want to see what this customer list query is, and this is one we didn't create, I click on Customer List and I click on Design. I immediately go into Design View and I can see that this query contains two fields, company name and customer ID, and that company name is ascending. If I want to view the results, I can click on this button right here, which is Datasheet View, and there's also another button I can use that I haven't shown you yet. This one's called Run. It just runs my query. I'm going to go ahead and click on Run, and notice that there's my listing of company names and customer IDs. Even though I've used Run, I'm still in my Datasheet View. I can go back to design view. So what's the difference between this icon, datasheet view, and run? At this level, there's no difference. But when you get into advanced action queries, you're going to use run instead of datasheet view because action queries actually change your data. I can close this down by double-clicking. Remember, if I double-click on a query name, I'm actually immediately running it. If I single-click and then click on design, I'm looking at the design of that query. Let's run our North America query one more time by double-clicking on it. And I can actually print this, just as in the first section, you printed your data sheet. To do that, if I want to print preview, I come up to my print preview button, and I'm in print preview mode. I can now click and zoom in. I can also send it to the printer with this button right here. Instead, I'm going to close out of print preview with this button right here. I'm back in my Dynaset. Now I close my Dynaset by double-clicking right here. In this section, you learned how to work with Access's queries. You learned how to select tables to include in your query, as well as how to add fields to the query grid. You learned how to specify criteria so that you could look at particular records. You also learned how to change the headers for your fields on your query grid. Finally, you learned how to print out the results of your query. Hopefully, you're becoming more comfortable in working with Access. You'll see that it's very consistent. For example, when we were working with tables, we could switch from datasheet view to design view. Hopefully, you've noticed that with queries, it's the exact same thing. You can easily switch from the design view to the datasheet view. My favorite part of Access is forms. This is because forms are an easy way to beautifully present your data. You're going to learn how to use the Forms wizard. You're going to learn how to view forms and also modify the forms that you've created using the Forms wizard. You're going to learn how to save and close forms and then how to reopen them. You're also going to learn how to edit and add your data while using forms. I'm going to come over to the Form menu and select New. At this point, I'm first asked to select an existing table or query. If I use this pull down right over here, I have a listing of all of my tables and my queries. I'm going to come down here and find my Personnel Actions table. I pick that table, and now I'm going to use a Form wizard to help to get me started with my form. I click on Form wizard, and up comes this dialog box right here. I can select a single column form with my field names going down the side, a tabular form with my field names going across the top in columns, and I can also pick a graph, a main and sub form, or auto form. I'm going to go ahead and pick single column. I click on OK, and I get my next dialog box. I'm asked which fields I want to include on my form. I want to select all my fields. Now realize I can pick one at a time and add it or remove it, or I can click on this button right here and add all of my fields at the same time. I've now added all of my fields at the same time, and now I'm going to go ahead and select Next. I can pick from a variety of styles. Notice that if you click on each one of these radio buttons right here, on the left side, you get a different look. I like the embossed look, so I'm going to go ahead and select Embossed, and then click on Next. I'm now asked for a title for my form. I'm going to go ahead and type right over what's there, PA Data Entry Form. I'm asked if I want to open the form with data in it or immediately go to the form's design. I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish. I want to open the form with my data in it. Here I am, and I'm looking at my resulting form. I have my ID, my type, initiated by, scheduled date, and so forth. You're going to learn how to edit your data in here in a little while. For right now, let's see how we can modify this form. So we're viewing the form right now in data entry mode. I have familiar buttons up top. I have a design view. I have a special one, which is form view, and I also have datasheet view. So I can go to Datasheet View, I can go back to Form View, and I can also go to Design View. So here I am in Design View. In Design View, I can move things around and do things to the form that was created through the Forms wizard. This is my form design window. Right now, I have a toolbox, and this has tools that I can use in modifying my form. I also have my familiar toolbar and my menu bar. If you haven't noticed, my toolbar and menu bar often change depending on what feature of Access I'm in. I want to move some of my fields around. In order to do that, I first need to learn how to select them. I'm going to select this type field. The way to do it is to click anywhere on either the title or the actual field contents over here. I'm going to click and notice that I get some handles around the field. If I move my mouse around and I get a hand, you're going to want to move until you get a hand. I can click and drag and move this field to somewhere else on the form. So I just move this field over to here. I now can pick a couple of the fields and do something to them at the same time. For example, if I want to pick initiated by, scheduled date, approved by, and effective date all at the same time and move them up as a group, one way I can do that is by holding down my Shift key as I select each one of them. I've selected them, and now they're all selected. I make sure that I get a hand, click and drag up, and now I've moved them up as a group. If I want to take the rating and the amount, as well as the comments, and move them up, another way I can select multiple fields is by lassoing them. I'm going to come over to a blank area on my form over here and click and drag to surround the fields that I want to select. I've surrounded them, and now they're all selected. I can tell they're selected because they all have handles. I click and drag up, and I've moved them up as a group, and now I can scroll up and take a look at my form again. If I want to move the field information separately from the field title, I have to do something a little bit special. I'm going to go ahead and pick this comments field. First, I'm going to deselect everything by clicking over on a blank area on the form. I'm going to scroll down so I get a better look at comments, and now click on the actual field information over here. At this point, rather than getting a hand, which would move the field and the title, I'm going to come up to this corner to get a hand with a finger pointing upward. This allows me to move the field contents separately from the field name. Watch. I click and drag, and my field information is moving without the field name. I'm going to scroll back up to the top of my form. I can also affect the alignment of my controls in relation to one another. I'm going to click and drag to surround the titles right here. Now notice, because I surrounded the titles, I have more handles around the title than around the attached field. I'm going to align these to the left side as opposed to the right side. Now, it's not this button right here. Watch what happens. If I pick left over here, all I'm doing is changing the alignment within the little box. I'm going to go back to right. Instead, what I want to do is come up to the Format menu and Align, and then pick left. Notice that now all of these titles are aligned on the left side instead of on the right, but they're not perfect. Now I can come over and within each of their boxes send them over to the left side so that they are indeed perfectly aligned. So these controls right here on the toolbar are within the box, where the Format menu and Align is how the boxes are aligned one to the next. So I'm going to pick right and send them back over to the right. At this point, I may want to take a look at what my form looks like. I can come back up to this button right here, go into Form View, and it's looking pretty good. I've now got my entries. I look at it in Form View and I see I still have a minor problem. I have to send the titles back over to the right within their boxes. I can easily go back into Design View. I still have them all selected, and then I click on Write. Now let's take a look. Back to Form View again, and there I am. And all my entries are aligned, and everything looks pretty good. There's a lot more things that you can do in Design View, and they're taught in the next tape. I'm going to click on this button right here and go back to Design View, and at this point, try to close my form down. When I double-click to close it down, I'm asked if I want to save my changes. I'm going to say yes, and as the name, type in Personnel Action Data Entry Form. I click on OK, and I've saved my form. Now that I've saved it and closed it, I can go ahead and open it back up again. I find it and double-click on it if I simply want to open it. I double-click, and now I'm back and I've opened it. Let's see how we can use our data entry form to view our data, edit it, and add records to our table. To view it, I can simply use these buttons right here to scroll through a record at a time. I can go to the last record and the first record, and I can also tab from field to field and shift tab to go back. I can move to the next record using this button, and at any time I can edit. For example, if this record number 2, PAID 2, was initiated by number 3, all I need to do is select that, type a 3, and tab down. All of my validation rules still apply. For example, if I try to change the scheduled date to 5/1 of 99 and hit my tab key, I get a message saying the scheduled date cannot be more than 10 years ago or more than 1 year from now. So that's the same validation rule that I set in my table. Once again, this reinforces how important it is to set everything up at the table level. I'm going to click at OK, backspace once, and change this to 91. Now I can tab out without any problem. I'm going to go to my last record and then click one more time on this right arrow right here. I'm now on a brand new record. I'm going to put in a PAID of 4. Come over to the type, which is defaulting to Q, and make it an S. I hit my tab key. That did pass the validation, so now I'm in initiated by. I type a number 5 and tab. My scheduled date is going to be 5/16/94. I'm going to leave it, and approved by is going to be 7. Come down to my rating and make it 6, and the amount 3,000. For comments, let's see what happens. I am typing some comments. Let's see what happens when I get to the end of a line. And you can see what happened. I word wrapped. But let's see what happens when I get to the end of a box. See how I was able to scroll down, so I can come up and down and look at my data. I can go back a record and come back and look at this record. And there I am. If I decide I want to make a change at this point to the actual form, for example, move my comments up a little bit, I go into Design View, scroll down on my form, grab the comments. I'm going to go ahead and move these independently. So first I've got a finger, and I click and drag up, and I was able to move the title without the field. Now I come down to Comments, get a finger, and click and drag up, and now I'm able to move the field without the title. Scroll back up, and go into Form View. And now my comments are a little higher on the screen. I can double click to close down the form and say yes, I want to save the changes. And here I am, and I'm back at my database window. You just entered the exciting world of Access Forms. You used a Forms wizard to create a data entry form. You learned how to view the form and how to modify the form that the wizard had created. You also learned how to add data edit data, and view data through a form. Now that you've got forms under your belt, you should find reports quite easy. We're going to start by learning the differences and similarities between forms and reports. You're going to learn the different types of Access reports and how to use the report wizard. You're going to learn about groups and totals and how to modify a report created with the report wizard. You're also going to learn how to save your reports, reopen them, and print them out. Let's go back into our PA data entry form. I'm going to double click on it so that I open it up. What I didn't show you before is you can actually print out this data entry form. I'm going to go into Print Preview right here. I click on Print Preview, and if I zoom in, I can see that I'd actually print out my data entry form. This is what would actually print out on your printer. In fact, let's try it. Come up to this button right here, click on it, and you're sending the form out to the printer as soon as you click on OK. Once you've printed your form and taken a look at it, go ahead and click on this button right here and you'll close the window. I'm back viewing my data entry form. I'm going to double click to close it down. So if you can print out a data entry form, what's the difference between a data entry form and a report? The first difference is that you can do data entry into a form and you can't do data entry into a report. Also, when you printed out your data entry form, you probably noticed that the printed copy looked very similar to the form that you saw on the screen. With reports, you can pick from various formats that have nothing to do with the way that the data appeared when you were entering it. So let's learn how to create reports. I'm going to start by clicking on the Report button. At this point, I want to create a new report, so I'm going to click on New. This is one way that I can create a new report. I'm going to show you another way, so let's cancel out. I'm going to come back up to my table list up here, select my table called Customers, which is already selected for me, and I'm going to come up and take a look at these tools right here. Notice that this first tool creates a new query, the second one creates a new data entry form, and the third one creates a new report. So I can actually bypass a step because I've picked my table and I can go directly in and pick that I want a new report. Remember, you can do this for forms and queries as well. I pick New Report, and already my customer table is selected. I'm going to use a report wizard. I pick Report Wizard, and now I get to pick what type of report I want. Here's the list. Single column is going to have my field names going across the top in columns. Groups and totals give me subtotals and grand totals on my report. Mailing labels allow me to create mailing labels. Summary, just look at summary data. And then I get tabular, that's like a spreadsheet. And some other options such as auto report and mail merge. We're going to go ahead and for the moment select single column and click on OK. I'm going to go ahead and pick the fields that I want included on my report. Here's a model of what it's going to look like. I'm going to pick customer ID and company name and contact name. And the only other information that I need is the phone and the fax. So these are the fields that I want included on my report. I'm now going to select Next. Now I'm asked what field I want to sort by. I want to sort by the company name. So I'm going to double click to select the company name and select Next. Also, I'm asked what style I want for my report, portrait or landscape. Take a look, landscape goes across, and portrait up and down. I'm asked about my line spacing and also what style, executive, presentation, or ledger. I'm going to go ahead and pick executive and portrait and say Next. Now I'm asked for a title for my report. I'm going to type in customer listing. I'm asked if I want to print each record on a new page, if I want to show the title on each page, and if I want to open cue cards to help with my report. I want to show the title on each page, and I want to go immediately to view my report. So I'm going to click on Finish. Here's the report that I just created. I've got my customer ID, my company name, contact name, phone, and fax. I can scroll through the pages by clicking right here. I can go to the very last page by clicking right here. The very first page by clicking right here. Notice I'm on page 1, and now I'm on page 23, and I can go back 22, and so forth. I can zoom out to get an overall view. I'm going to go ahead and double click to close this down, and I'm asked if I want to save the changes. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and I'm going to call this report Customer Listing. So now I'm actually naming the report. Click on OK, and I've closed it. If I come over to Report, there's my customer listing. Before we rerun this report or take another look at it, let's see how we can create a groups and totals report. Remember, groups and totals reports allow you to easily create subtotals and grand totals on your reports. You'll be very surprised how easy this is to do. I have my report tab already selected. I'm going to go ahead and select New this time. I need to pick a table or a query. Let me use my pull down, and I'm going to pick from my list here, I'm going to pick Orders Detail. Got Order Details selected, and I'm going to select Report Wizard. At this point, I want a Groups and Total report. I click on Groups and Totals and click on OK. Here's the fields in that particular table. I want all of them, so I'm going to click on this button right here. Now I click on Next. Now I'm asked what I want to group by. This is very important. What do I want my subtotals by? I want my subtotal by my order ID. I've got order ID selected. I'm going to click on this button right here and then click on Next. I'm asked, how do I want to group data within each field? If I use this pull down, notice I can group things in 10s, 50s, 100s, and so forth. I'm going to pick normal so that it groups on each individual order ID. I click on Next, and now I'm asked, what do I want to sort by? What order do I want to be by? I'm going to pick Product ID. So within an order ID, I want to be in order by Product ID. Now I click on Next. Once again, I'm asked what style I want for my report. I'm going to leave it at Executive and put this one in Landscape. That way I have more room for my fields going across. I click on Next, and I'm asked for a title. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at Order Details. Notice I have this little option right here, which allows me to calculate percentages of the total. This is a new powerful feature of Access 2. I want to take a look at my report with data in it, and I do want to calculate my percentages. I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish, and let's see what we get. If I scroll over and take a look, I've got order ID 10,000, I've got a product ID, unit price, quantity, and I've got a percentage. Let's zoom out and take a look, and notice that if I zoom into this particular order right here, this particular order, 10,001, has several different items on it, product IDs, I've got unit prices, quantities, and so forth. I do have some problems. I don't think that I really want to add up my product ID, nor do I want a percentage for my product ID. So I'm going to make some changes by going into the design view of this particular report. I'm going to click on this button right here, which closes the window, and I immediately go into design view for the report. Once again, I have a toolbox, and I also have a report design window. This should look pretty similar to when we were working with our form design. So now I can modify my report. First of all, I'm going to come over and look at the sections of my report. I have a header for the report, a header for each page, a header for each order ID, then I have a detail section, then I have an order ID footer, and then I have a page footer, and finally a report footer. What I want to get rid of first is I don't want a total for my product ID. So I'm going to click on it and hit delete. Now I've gotten rid of the total. I also have my percentage down here. Now what I'm going to do is get rid of this line by clicking on it, hold down my shift key, click on this item right here so I've selected it, scroll down, and with my shift key still held down, I'm going to pick each of those two lines, there's actually two lines there, and this right here. I've now selected all of the totaling for my product ID, both at an order ID footer level and also a report footer level. I hit delete, and now I've removed my product ID. I do want my unit price, but for unit price, I only want to sum it. I don't want a percentage. I'm going to go ahead and click on this right here and hit delete, scroll down, and I do want to sum my unit price, so I'm okay over there. For quantity, I do want to sum my quantity. For quantity, I do want to sum my quantity, and I do want my percent of total. For discount, I also want to sum it, and I don't want my percent of total. I click on it and hit delete. Let's go in to look at our report and see where we are right now. I'm going to come up to this button right here, which is Print Preview, and let's take a look and see where we are. If I take a look at this, I notice that my order ID numbers are pretty far from the title, and also my product ID numbers are pretty far from their title. Also, same problem with unit price and quantity and so forth. So I just want to make some cosmetic changes to this report. Once again, I'm totaling my unit price, and I'm also totaling my quantity, and I've got a percentage that each of these is of the grand total for the report. Let's go back, click on this close button right here, and I'm back in my design view again. My problem is that order ID, if I look right here, extends far beyond the title. I'm going to go ahead, get a mouse pointer that looks like this, a double-headed arrow with that control selected. So I don't want to move it with the hand this time, I want to size it. And I click and drag to size it. I'm going to do the same thing with my product ID. Now the important thing here is you don't want to size it so small that your data doesn't fit. I'm going to do the same thing with the price. And you can find when you view your report, you'll see if you have a problem. I'm going to size my sum as well. I click on the sum and click and drag to size it. Now that I've sized the sum that's in the order ID footer, I'm going to scroll down and grab these guys over here. Don't want to forget about them. I select it and size it, select and size, and select this one and size it as well. Let's scroll back up. I want to move my quantity over. I click to select quantity, hold down my shift key, click again. I'm going to select each of the controls, making sure that I don't miss any. Now that I've done that, I'm going to click and drag with the hand them over as a group. Move them over, and now they're moved over on my report. Let's go ahead and see what we've got right now. I click on Preview. And if we take a look, things are looking a lot better. Still want to size my discount, so let's go back one more time and pick the discount. I'm going to pick the field right here, size it, And do the same thing with the sum and my line. My line's down here. And let's run it. Now that I like how it looks, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this icon right here and say yes, I want to save the changes. For the name of my report, I'm going to go ahead and type in price and cost information. Click on OK, and now I've saved my report. If I want to open up an existing report, I need to find it on the list. There it is right there. Now, if I want to run it, all I need to do is double click on it or click on Preview. If I want to go directly into Design View, I can click on this button right here. I'm going to go into Design, and you can see I'm back in Design View. Double click to close it down, and this time I'm going to double click on it instead of clicking on Design, and I actually just run it. Well, now that I really like my report, I want to print out a final copy. All I need to do is come up here to this button right here, which is Print, and click on it. I want to print the entire report, so I click on OK. And this is going to go ahead and go out to the printer. I can click on Close, and now I'm back at my database window. So remember, we've learned how to create tables, queries, forms, and reports. Our tables are where we initially define what our data is going to look like. We can go into Design View, and we can also go into Table View. If I close down this table, I can also pull up a listing of my queries. I've got queries listed. If I want to run one, I can double click on it. If I want to go into its design mode, I click on Design, take a look at its design, and then I can go over to Data Sheet View and take a look at my Dynaset, my query result. I'm going to close this down. We've also created data entry forms. If I want to go into this data entry form in design mode, I can click on Design and make changes to it. I can go right from here into Data Sheet View and take a look at Data Sheet View, or I can click on here and go into Form View. Close my form down. We've also created reports. I've created my price and cost information. I can go into Design View and modify its design, or toggle over to Print Preview and take a look at what it will look like when it's printed. I'm going to double click and close it down. Okay. I'm done working with Access for right now, so I want to close Access down. I can close my database first, but there's really no need to. I'm going to come up here to the control icon for Microsoft Access and double click. I've closed down Access, and Access has closed down my database for me. I'm back here at my Microsoft Office program group. In this section, you learned how to create Access reports. You saw how similar Access reports and forms are to one another. Also included on this tape, you got an introduction to Microsoft Access. You learned how to create your own databases and tables and how to change the properties of your fields. You learned how to get help when you need it and also how to query your data so you can look at exactly what you want to look at. On the next tape, you'll learn how to work with advanced queries. There are several different types of advanced queries in Access. You'll learn how to include calculations in your queries, how to use multi-table queries, how to create parameter queries, and how to create action queries. You'll also learn how to work with advanced forms and reports so that you'll get some great and exciting advanced and report techniques. We've enjoyed working with you and hope to work with you again in the future.